So this is section 2 of Implication of Juvenile Collection. This is about the history of criminal identification, the path and implications of DNA collection and fingerprinting are really similar to each other. So to fully appreciate those paths and implications, I want to go over briefly the history of fingerprinting. Besides just personal use for identification, mass use of fingerprinting for identification was done by the British occupation of India. Obviously, the Brits had hired locals to help them control their empire, and they were having problems with the people they had hired would pass away, and because they had trouble telling them apart, a family member would take the identification and then could still continue to collect the pension. So the British government decided to use fingerprints as a means of identifying who was the actual employee so they could give out the pension correctly. This turned out to be really successful, to the point that in the 1870s the British government decided they were going to fingerprint all of their prisoners. Around that same time, the idea that criminal behavior was linked to heredity came about. It was really based on the caste system in India. The lower caste people were being found to be committing a number of common crimes, thefts, robberies, kidnappings, and they thought because marriages were to remain within the castes that maybe these criminal traits were being breeded in. They never really took into consideration maybe the sociological factors of that they were poor. So they started to get the idea of maybe we can use fingerprints to prove criminal activity and track criminal activity. So in 1898, the first murder trial where fingerprints was used as evidence occurred, which led to a conviction. Based on the success of that trial, the colonial government of India decided they created the Indian Evidence Act, which said that by law, at least in India, that fingerprints could be admissible in court. This law also outlined some other uses. One was that once you have the fingerprints on file, that you could then take those fingerprints and correlate that to the person's criminal record so that we can track habitual criminals, and they can then adjust sentences according to those findings. They also decided that they were going to take a leap forward and legally state that no two set of fingerprints were alike. Science had not yet proven that that was yet the case. So the academic world decided to study fingerprints even further. Sir Francis Galton in 1892 published his book Fingerprints, and he compared the frequency of the fingerprint characteristics, the loops and arches and whorls, to other ethnic groups. He really didn't find any differences or variations. They also tried to use the idea of fingerprints to match primates to human beings. They wanted to see if fingerprints maybe evolved along a particular corridor, and to say that they found a missing link between the two. So at that point there was at least a correlation between evolution and fingerprinting in the academic study of fingerprints. So the British government had decided that maybe there really was a genetic relationship between crime and castes. So one of their possible solutions was positive eugenics. It's the idea that maybe we can breed out a particular group, and those criminal elements would disappear as we bred them out. The colonial government never approved that action, but we saw its actual consequence in World War II as its answer to the Jewish question. So the last argument that was trying to prove that fingerprints could at least support evolution was the idea that maybe the fingerprints were an adaptation for previous primates to help them grip things more, and that because human beings didn't do that, it became a useless trait that we had. However, each time that they were going to prove this,